I challenge you to a duel.
Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Movie Duel podcast. My name is Peter and I'm your host. On each episode of the Movie Duel podcast, we select a subject based around films, and then myself and one of my co-hosts each pick a movie that we think best fits that subject. However, this is the first time we are slightly breaking from that tradition, in which I won't be selecting a film for this episode, but it will be Movie Duellist versus Movie Duellist. I sit in judgment of Nicole and Tarquin's choices for Best Kaiju Movie. But before we get into that, just a few points of order for this episode. First of all, I'd like to extend some thanks to some people who liked and shared our post over on X for the last episode, which was a quick draw with filmmaker Warren Budensky. And this time those thanks go to Lexi Bowen, LJ Human, Paul from Filmbusters, Jeff Brandon Warner, Warren Budensky himself, and the guys over at Movie Drone Podcast. Thank you very much for your love over on X. I'd like to thank everybody who voted in the poll as well. It was a victory to myself with 2 votes to 1 for Society on our most monstrously perverse science fiction film episode with Tarquin. But please head on over to the poll over on X and on Spotify where you can vote in this week's episode. Even if you don't use either of those platforms, you can let us know your vote through either DMs on Facebook or Instagram, where you can just search Movie Duel Podcast, or you can find us on X and on Threads at Movie Duel Pod, or you could also email us your vote to movieduelpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want a little extra of the Movie Duel podcast, you can join our Patreon page for just around about £1, $1 a month. You can get access to our Movie Duelist roundtables, which are basically just all 5 of us on one episode talking about a chosen subject, or giving top 5s, top 10s, various different things that are going to be on that those special episodes. And you can find that at patreon.com/Movie Duel Podcasts. The link for that is in the show notes for this episode as well. And you can also get some more of myself and Vanessa over at the so-called X-Files podcast, which is now live. We're a few episodes deep into that, where we look into the greatest TV program ever made, season by season, pick some of our favourite episodes to talk about, as well as some of the wider mythology of the series. It's a great deal of fun, and I would encourage you to go over and have a listen. And then finally, a couple of notes about this episode. There is some strong language, and there will be spoilers for both of the films that we are discussing, so you have been warned. But without further ado, I hope you enjoy episode 28 of the Movie Duel podcast.
It's Godzilla! It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not. Still, we should run like it is Godzilla! Though it isn't.
Okay, so joining me on this first ever Duelist versus Duelist episode of the Movie Duel podcast is Nicole.
Hello.
And Tarquin. Hello, Tarquin.
Hey. Watcha.
How are we doing, guys?
Still breathing, still above ground. All good.
How about you, Tarquin? Is it nice and sunny down London town?
Intermittently, like you'll see a moment, and then it'll rain for 10 days.
Yeah. Good old British weather. We do like the British weather here on the Movie Duel podcast. But yes, so this is our first ever time that we've, or the first time that I've not had a boat in the race for an episode of the Movie Duel podcast. So we are going to be doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to sort of sit slightly in judgment of your two choices, and we'll we'll see how that goes. But before we get into that, Tarquin, have you been up to much sort of movie wise in the last week or so? Have you seen anything good?
Um, no, I have not been to the cinema since last week. Yeah, afraid not.
What about you, Nicole?
Well, I haven't been to the cinema, but I have been catching up on some films on streaming. I saw David Fincher's latest, The Killer, with Michael Fassbender on
Fassbinder,
Netflix.
what did you think?
It's solid. It seems a little. The pacing feels a little different from his previous work. It's just kind of like almost like a metronome, just click, 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 moving along.
It's very much to show you how boring and mundane 90% of his life is until it suddenly
Right.
gets exciting. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
He does
I
that.
also caught up on Stakeland and Kill List
Oh,
on
Stakeland.
Tubi.
I haven't seen
So
that for a while.
I had
Enjoyed
not seen
that.
it at all before. So I was really surprised, I think. I mean, I knew it was kind of a low budget vampire movie, but the style of it is really, it's funny. It's very grounded, but art house at the same time,
Mm, mm.
and very well acted, well written, some really unexpected turns that it took.
It's a
So
bit of
I
a sort of
enjoyed that.
gritty version of Zombieland, I thought, from
Yes,
memory.
very much. Very much. I almost
But I
expected him to say, always double tap when he take out a vampire.
But I was surprised. I was really surprised by that film as well because I thought it was, even though they're not. It's not very sort of classic vampires. They are very much sort of zombie vampires in a
Mhm.
way. How much I enjoyed it because I'm normally quite a purist when it comes to vampires and zombies and that kind of thing. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
You don't like to mix your undead.
And Kill List is one of my favorite films of the last 15 years. So. Did that resonate with you? Obviously, it's very British. So, did you enjoy that?
I did. I did. I mean, in so much as one can enjoy some of the various events that happened. It's just I will never not see Michael Smiley as Tyres first and foremost in any and all roles that he's in, so it made it a little difficult to see him as a gritty hitman type.
What is this
Yeah.
tires you speak of?
Is from Spaced, Edgar Wright
Oh, right.
and Simon Pegg.
Oh, Michael Smiley. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So every time I see him, I want to go.
He's Stompy, the alternative club comedian in some Channel 4 show like 10 years before that. He was like a homeless comedian. That's how he broke out onto TV.
Have
He's
not
He
actually-
turned up on Spaced ages later.
He's actually, I think he's quite an underrated actor, to be fair, Michael Smiley. I think
No, he was
he's very
quite good in this.
versatile. He's very
really
versatile.
good in Kill List.
Mm. What have I've been watching stuff for other podcasts. Really, I watched Dracula versus Frankenstein, which
Yeah, what's that about?
that
Besides the obvious. But is it like some
Do you know what,
very, very
Tarquin?
cheap, low budget
I think
thing?
it would be right up your street. Definitely. It's.
Okay.
I mean, I laughed out loud at least 5 times. Not that you're supposed to, but I would thoroughly recommend it for anybody who likes, those really sort of cheesy 70s, 60s, 70s kind of horror films. And it's almost a sight to behold. Lon Chaney Jr.'s in it. I think it was his last film. He's the only person of note that's really in it, but it's just so, there's not much of classic sort of Dracula or Frankenstein in the film, really. It feels like it's a film that they've just sort of plonked those two characters in to give it a bit of bang in the title, really. But it's definitely worth a look, and you can find it in full on YouTube as well. So you've got no excuse not to check it out. Obviously, listen to the Creative Psychopaths podcast episode, which will probably be out by the time this goes out, in which we discuss it, because it was a tremendous amount of fun to talk about it as well.
I'm very excited about Poor Things dropping on Disney. That's already happened.
Yes, yeah, I spotted that.
So give me a day and I'll have something on that.
Yeah. Well, I'm after this recording, I'm off for a week from work, so I've got loads to try and sort of catch up on, and hopefully actually watch more than 2 films from 2024, which would be good, because I've only watched 2 so far. But enough about the films we have been watching, and more about the films that we've been watching for the podcast. So, with this being a Duelist versus Duelist episode, it fell to me to pick your subject, and I chose to give you the best kaiju movie. So,
Well, why don't you tell them what the restriction was, because it's made a huge difference in what I picked.
it did. There was one restriction. Well, I mean, it's a general restriction for the Movie Duel podcast anyway, I guess. Is that the film has to be either released on streaming or physical media. Mainly because Nicole wanted to pick Godzilla -1, but that's not been released for me or Tarquin to actually see it, because we didn't get to see it at the cinema. So it kind of limited Nicole for her choice slightly.
Yeah, apparently Toho Studios are very slow to...
Yeah, I read somewhere it's not going to be till June, July before it gets a streaming release.
Well,
which is crazy. But
I definitely think we should come back to it, because I feel like I've been reading this book, Kaiju for Hipsters, and it's made me realise how incredibly ignorant I am on the subject. And so now that I have read this book, or I've got most of the way through it, I really want to catch up on a lot of stuff. And so I think we should come back to it. And everyone has been raving about Godzilla -1. I mean, I haven't seen a bad response to it yet, so I think that's one we should work in somehow. Best Godzilla film.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, that's not a bad shout, because there's a lot of good ones out there, a lot of good Godzilla and that sort of franchise or canon or whatever. There's a lot of good films in there, and some bad ones as well.
60 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be up there with one of the longest running franchises, surely.
oh, definitely.
Consistent franchise. I know they had a few sort of maybe sort of barren years in between, sort of changing owners of studios and things like that, but they're still kicking them out. Even with Hollywood remakes and Roland Emmerich and everything else, they're still going strong in terms of the Japanese output. But to give you a teeny bit of history about kaiju or kaiju films, kaiju is the Japanese term that is commonly associated with media involving giant monsters. It literally means a strange beast. Am I pronouncing kaiju right? Kaiju?
I
Nicole?
think it's just kaiju. Yeah.
Kaiju. So genre elements of this kind of film were present at the end of Winsor McKay's 1921 animated short, Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, the Pet, in which a mysterious giant animal starts destroying a city until it is countered by a massive airstrike. So you managed to see, you can find a short of that, or that short on Wikipedia. Actually, that was directly on the Wikipedia page.
He made a film, Gertie the Friendly Dinosaur, where he'd come out on stage and talk to an animated drawing of a dinosaur that would be munching the scenery behind him as well. So
that's cool.
There's another kaiju entry.
Cool. And probably the first kind of representation within feature-length films 1925. The 1925 adaptation of Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World had a brontosaurus running rampage in London and paved the way cinematically for both King Kong and Godzilla. But the highest grossing film in this genre is Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong from 2005, which grossed just over $356 million domestically. But it's not all good, you know. Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, one of the more recent interpretations of Kaiju, sits at number 30 on the bottom 100 on IMDb. But first of all, Tarquin, what's your sort of relationship with these sort of giant monster movies or Kaiju movies? Is it something you're a fan of?
Well, as I say, totally ignorant of the Japanese form. I haven't even seen that many Godzilla films. But then I made a little list of all the Western ones I could think of, and there's a lot of stuff that I really like on it. I'll read it out at the end. So yeah, I do like giant things crushing cities and people fleeing. My problem, I guess, is that they're never violent enough for me. They're usually aimed at children. I want to see an adults-only dinosaur film where the full implications of a giant rampaging beast are seen through in elaborate detail.
So did you like the newer Jurassic Park films with
Well, yeah, I do
Pratt?
have that problem with them. That they're never violent enough. But yeah, there are moments in them that I find really exciting and wonderful.
Yeah, because I found the first
Like, I
one
loved
in
where
the new series to be much more violent than I was expecting.
Yeah, is that the guy from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yes.
Where he's like got trained
Yes.
raptors and he's riding around. Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah.
I think they all had their moments. The Jurassic World franchise, and we're getting more. We're getting Jurassic. I can't remember what it's called. Is it Gareth Edwards is doing it? I think.
There's already a movie called Jurassic Galaxy. It is not good, but it's highly entertaining.
No, I'm trying to think now. What
Would
it's
recommend with a group of drunken friends, perhaps.
called. Well, what about you, Nicole? Obviously, you know, kaiju is a very big thing in Japan. You're a very big fan of Japanese cinema. Is it something that you've delved into a lot?
I would say it's not something that I've deliberately sought out after reaching adulthood. Mostly it's from my childhood. My local UHF station on Saturdays after cartoons had finished up. Cartoons generally ended around noon or just after. And then 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Channel 56 would host the Creature Double Feature. Ooh. And it was most often a pair of Godzilla or Gamera or other kaiju type films. There were sometimes, Dracula and Frankenstein and that kind of thing as well, but most often it was the kaiju movies. So, I mean, I have a tremendous affection for Gamera in particular because Gamera is a friend to all children, even though he kills a lot of people accidentally, apparently.
He's the big turtle.
Yes, the big turtle
Okay.
that spins like a frisbee, but with fire shooting out of his limb holes. As he flies. So it's very silly. It's this giant, fanged turtle.
I'm
But
not going to be able to get over limb holes as a word now.
I mean, you look it up. Look up
Yeah.
camera flying. I don't know any other way to describe it.
Is he
But-
an enemy of all adults?
I mean, so I enjoyed them, but on reaching adulthood, I was like, oh, kaiju movies are for kids, so I'm not gonna bother looking up, Godzilla 1985 or the Roland Emmerich one in '98. I mean, there were a lot that came out in Japan in the intervening years, but they didn't really make it to the U.S. So you kind of had to be a collector, or you had to know which video rental shops to go to be able to find stuff like that.
Well, not to hang too much on that whole the Japanese side of kaiju, because I think it is something that's multinational. But obviously they're the most sort of famous for it. And obviously I knew who Godzilla was growing up, and I'd probably seen a couple of the films quite young. But then I remember around sort of when I was maybe 13, 14, they did I think they had like a Godzilla week on BBC Two over here, and Jonathan Ross, who's obviously a big presenter over here, he's a big fan of the Godzilla franchise, and they basically just showed about 3 Godzilla films a night on BBC Two, into the early hours, and I recorded loads, and I really sort of got into them over that period.
Godzilla versus the giant smog monster.
Yes, yeah.
With the hippie theme, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, and they did sort of touch on a lot of those sort of environmental, nuclear kind of. So they tackled a lot of really tough sort of subjects in a way, and I think that there's a lot of depth to any even the films that we're going to be discussing today. But I think
it all goes back to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think.
Yeah,
with Godzilla.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly does with Godzilla and most of those kaijus that came out of Japan. But obviously, I'm not picking a film, so it's down to you two to pick films. First of all, we're going to go to Nicole. So, how easy was this choice outside of obviously that you couldn't pick Godzilla -1?
I mean, I had some debate back and forth whether the host qualified. And
I was massively
whether,
surprised that you didn't pick the host.
Well, I think I've got it in my head that kaiju has sort of a minimum size requirement, and the creature from the host doesn't quite meet that for me. To me, it's just a monster movie, which is just very slightly different.
Okay.
I do love the host tremendously, but I just didn't feel like it quite fit in the box for me. And so, I've thought about looking at the 1950s movies in the U.S. with giant insects, like them and
Ooh, yeah.
giant ants, that sort of thing. And I was just like, it's just an ant that's, big. So I went with Guillermo del Toro's love letter to kaiju and tokusatsu movies, 2013's Pacific Rim.
We always thought alien life would come from the stars. But it came from deep beneath the Pacific.
What the hell is going on?
The first kaiju made land in San Francisco. The second attack hit Manila. And then the third one hit Cabo. And then we learned this was not going to stop. In order to fight monsters, we created monsters of our own. We needed a new weapon. The Jaeger program was born. Two pilots, our minds, our memories, connected. And man and machine become one.
Of our hope. At the end of our time, we've chosen to believe in each other. Today we face the monsters that are at our door. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
it is pretty cool.
Pacific Rim.
Said Pacific Rim, 2013, directed and written in part by Guillermo del Toro, also written with Travis Beacham, starring Charlie Hunnam doing an execrable American accent, Rinko Kikuchi, Idris Elba, Charlie Day, Bern Gorman, and because it is a Guillermo del Toro movie, Clifton Collins Jr. and Ron Perlman are also in it prominently. And there's, the Australian dudes, Max Martini, Robert Kaczynski. There's the Russians that don't get any lines, really. So, this is, as he puts it in the special features, Guillermo del Toro says this is a movie by people who love giant robots fighting giant monsters, for people who love giant robots versus giant monsters. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. What it promises you is what it delivers. And it's a tremendous spectacle movie. While the chemistry is not as good as I wanted it to be between Charlie Hunnam and Rinko Kikuchi, but with everyone else, it's kind of it's a pretty well-oiled machine. Charlie Day and Bern Gorman work well together as a duo. Charlie Day and Ron Perlman, I think, work tremendously together, playing off one another in their scenes. Idris Elba has that authority that you really believe that this man's ready to defend the planet. And why wouldn't you with a name like Stacker Pentecost? So... yeah, I love it. I've loved it since, I anticipated it when I first saw the previews for it, and you see the robot pick up that cargo ship to hit a monster with it, and I was just like, I'm in. I am in. I am down for this film. So yeah, that's
my pedantic brain demands a synopsis.
That's the quick summary. It demands a synopsis.
You missed your synopsis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so the synopsis: as a war between humankind and monstrous sea creatures wages on, a former pilot and a trainee are paired up to drive a seemingly obsolete special weapon in a desperate effort to save the world from the apocalypse. So.
Okay, better now.
Okay. Today we are cancelling the apocalypse.
So is it? Did you see this when it first came out in cinemas on the big screen?
Oh yeah, several times.
That must have been a trip, yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, it's built for spectacle. I think it stands up. I rewatched it last night on Blu-ray. The effects still look great, and there is, deliberetely a little bit of man in a suitiness to the creature design. They designed them. Number one, I think the parameters were it can't really look too much like any Earth creature. It needs to look really different. At least, it can't significantly resemble something else. And that it had to have a little bit of a look like it could be a man in a really good suit acting as the monster. And I think they carry that off quite well.
Yeah, so... I think it really helps to sort of... I think they sort of... Not to sort of go off piste a little bit, but it's almost like Force Awakens, where they made the characters look like they would have looked as, make-up characters in the original Star Wars. Some of the aliens and things like that, although they were still partly sort of CGI'd and everything, and I think that adds to the charm of the film. I think that's relying really heavily on CGI, but they're grounding what the actual characters look like by making them more realistic, I suppose, or more lived in.
Yeah. And I mean, there's, you can tell that Del Toro loved the Godzilla series, thing and anime like Evangelion and all the giant robot cartoons like Grandizer and what's Battle of the Planets called in Japan? It's like Science Ninja Team something. But all those shows, they got imported over to the US, and those are ones that I would watch in the afternoons after coming home from school. So, I mean, I guess that's another where I had some affection for giant, technically mechas. Let's get that out of the way. Please don't send emails about it. I know they're not independent AI-driven robots, that they are mecha suits that are driven by human intelligence. Okay, got it? Okay.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Charlie Hannon's accent, because bloody hell. He always looks good. He looks intense. He always seems to be in the moment.
It's physical.
But whenever he talks, my brain just dies. It goes, He's got this horrible, boring voice. So
you and I are
him as a star
compatible.
is a problem.
There's a few. I mean, was Idris Elba have an American accent in this? Do you know what I watched?
No.
I watched Prometheus last night, and I'm trying to think. I'm getting a bit like because he has an American accent in that, and it's really dodgy. So no, or maybe he doesn't then. But Robert Kaczynski's Australian accent is very odd as well. So I don't think.
Yeah, I know him from EastEnders.
Yeah, I was looking at it thinking, why the hell is this guy from EastEnders in this big budget film? Because I've never seen him in any other big budget film. It seems like a bit of a one and done.
Yeah, he was great in EastEnders. He was like Stacey Slater's psycho brother, menacing Bradley. Yeah. But yeah,
maybe for budgetary reasons.
It's very, very random.
I liked Charlie Hannon's brother, who doesn't last long. That's the scene or two. But you could see how exasperating it was to have Charlie Hannon as a brother. He had this kind of nice world-weary look about him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was one of the questions I was going to ask, because obviously, the start of this film is very, it's obviously setting the scene, and there's a big time jump at the start of the film.
Mm.
And I kind of, when I watched this, I was kind of like, I kind of hankered for that story between this. This almost feels like it could be a sequel to, because obviously we go from the kaijus appearing, and then we get a lot of exposition into where we are, when the story proper starts. But I kind of would have liked to have maybe known a bit more about from there to then, or from then to now.
Now, see, I really like the way that he gets to the action faster. Number one, by having this first, early sample battle with Raleigh and Yancey. But also, it's just in 15 minutes, he establishes what the kaiju are, what mankind's response to them were. It gives you Raleigh's entire backstory, how the Jaeger program works, what the drift is, and it brings in the most iconic theme music of the film. And I checked, when it does the time jump, 5 years later, that's at the 15-minute mark. Just bam, 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 bam. You get everything you need to know to start this portion of the story. And that's one of the things.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of
really
Starship
like
Troopers. Like it hits the ground running.
Yeah.
Throws you into this new world, and you just got to keep up with it.
Because the second installment is always better than the first installment. When you're in a lot of trilogy type films, so this, I like that they sort of previously on Pacific Rim, here's the whole, capsule encapsulation of what happened before, and now let's go. Now that you know everything you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it doesn't work. I mean, it's just I think it's more that I like that. It's almost like the first of the new round of Godzilla's, the Gareth Edwards film. You know, it's so fleet. You know, you get such a fleeting glimpse of Godzilla and you know the kaiju in general. And I like that sort of, you know, this is the first time that we're seeing these kind of things, and this is how the world's dealing with it, which I suppose isn't the film that he's wanted to make. So, but it does work, you know, it does work well enough to introduce you to that world and where we are and where we're going, and into the story that he wants to tell, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think that was partly the intent. Is this was what he wanted to focus on, was how mankind would vanquish them eventually, and not the run up to that. Like I said, I wish the chemistry was better between Charlie Hunnam and Rinko Kikuchi, and I don't know what the main problem was. If it was just that, you know, how they worked together didn't translate properly to the screen, or I think there just wasn't quite enough story in there between them.
I think it made it
It's kind of instantaneous. She sees him take his shirt off, and then that's it. They're making goo eyes at each other.
You know, I thought that at first that was what she was embarrassed about, that she was caught peeping, but I think she's supposed to be staring at his scars that he got from the battle at the opening. Because you do see at the end of it, when he's on the beach, you can see that he's kind of torn open along the sides, and he's got these big scratches across his shoulder, and I think that's what she's looking at. But, you know, coincidentally, not a difficult man to look at without his shirt on.
Yeah, he does that.
I think that's probably thrown in a little bit
Yeah.
for the ladies.
I'd agree with you on that, definitely. He's an interesting looking dude.
Yeah. I mean, this, you know, he's a not unattractive man, but it's just I don't find him that captivating as an actor.
No.
He's not bad.
I think he he definitely struggles as a lead, I think.
Yeah.
If you look at something like The Gentleman, where he's, you know, it's a big sort of Guy Ritchie film with lots of characters, and although he's one of the central characters in that film, he's not carrying all the weight of the film, which he you know, he most definitely is, and he's maybe not that capable of doing.
Yeah, I suspect that a few members of the cast were compromises in terms of budget in the casting, although Idris Elba apparently was supposed to be Tom Cruise at first, and Tom couldn't do it because of scheduling. So I'm actually very glad that did not work out, because I think Idris Elba has such tremendous presence in pretty much every role he takes. But this in particular needs, you know, to be, as he says in the movie, all he needs to be for everyone is a fixed point. So for everything to...
Yeah, he's got the authority and the gravitas. He's kind of going through the stringer bell motions.
Yeah.
But that whole organisation, man, I mean, they seem like children, really. I mean, squabbling. Are those the best scientists humanity can come up with? For God's sake.
They're eccentric.
Who's the other guy? Not Charlie Day, but the other bloke. I know I've seen him somewhere.
Yeah.
Where would I have seen him before?
He's in Dark Knight Rises. He's in Game of Thrones.
I first saw him on Torchwood. He's in the first season of Torchwood.
He's been in all sorts, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's an interesting actor. I think they just wanted, you know, character actors.
It's just very over the top, and you know,
they're the comic relief.
and they all are with their stupid arguments and squabbling. That's a problem I have, I think, with Japanese cinema. I mean, this is an incredibly important operation, and all the time they're arguing about nothing, you know.
Yeah. When I think,
they're arguing mainly about methodology.
Yeah.
I would not put them in a giant robot, any of them.
I think they're meant to be a bit of a sort of C-3PO, R2-D2 kind of bit of relief.
Yeah, they're an
aren't
odd
they, really?
couple.
But I mean, Charlie Day he's obviously not the most versatile of actors. He's very much playing.
This is his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
Absolutely, this kind
absolutely.
of character.
I mean, you have to love him. He does his Bobcat Goldthwait thing perfectly.
He does
Yeah.
manic very well. And so it's one of the reasons why the follow-up movie was not as good. Not nearly. So, yeah, I
was
would
gonna
not
ask you about
recommend
the
Pacific
sequel.
Rim Uprising.
Is anybody in it from the first one?
Yeah, Charlie Day is in it. Rinka Kikuchi is in it for a short while. No, they added my brain won't hit Force Awakens.
Oh, John
John Boyega.
Boyega.
They added.
Yep.
And I mean, he's quite good. He's a charisma fountain,
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, but it still doesn't help the film terribly. But speaking of this film, Charlie Day does, I think, very well in this. Bern Gorman's just intended to be Mr. Uptight, and it feels like that's the only direction he was given, is be uptight.
With his cane and his strange walk and all that.
Yes. Yeah. Be awkward. Is the main thing. And then, it's very much just stereotypes. There's a lot of single dimensionality. Robert Kaczynski is the Australian Chuck Hansen. He's the, egotistical, cocky guy. Instead, Max Martini, he was, the tough dad who still
awful.
loves his boy.
He was the worst one. Yeah. Very stiff and one-dimensional.
Yeah, yeah. But, I mean, I think, Ron Perlman brings in a great pop of color as Hannibal Chow, named after my favorite historical figure and second favorite Sichuan restaurant in Brooklyn. So,
And the robots are fantastic. I really love the robots. Like the weathered steel and everything about them just looks perfect.
yeah, that was important to him. That was something that Del Toro made sure that they added. Like, these guys can't look brand new. They have to look like they've been out in the field. And everything that looks decorative from a distance has to be functional when you get up close to it.
Yeah, that really works. And the way they were always shot from a worm's eye view and these enormous hangers, it gives them real weight.
And the movement, they move, they have a little bit of slowness to the movement that you would associate with something that huge. It would take a lot of power, a lot of inertia to overcome to get them to move quickly. So it makes sense that they would move fairly slowly, and you really get a sense of weight from that kind of movement.
Okay.
So they step on the ground,
have
you
quibbles.
can feel like ka-chonk, kind of.
I have quibbles with the operating system. I don't think that's the best way to do it. Like my mate Bran,
No, probably
if you
not.
give him a spliff and a sofa and a cup of coffee, he can land a Harrier jet on the deck of an ocean liner in the middle of the roaring ocean. But why do they have to be strapped into these machines that look deadly? Like you're going to go rip someone's legs apart all the time. Why do they have to take damage when they're hit? Why not just have be in a nice comfortable room with a PlayStation controller operating those robots? Do we really need the drift?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like
I think the answer is that, that's not how they do it
It's
in
cinematic.
animes.
Yeah.
Plus, there's more of a sense of, real human danger by having the pilots in this compartment where they can be physically hurt. Although, like you said, obviously that's the biggest weakness of them, is you damage the human pilots and you put the mecha out of commission. So, no,
I suppose
Kaiju have obviously got wise to that,
Yeah. I suppose it's there to add stakes to the story, isn't it? And they're not just going to be emotional stakes as well as physical stakes to the characters that are the pilots, I suppose.
This is where my annoying brain raises its little finger and says, but, why?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I totally agree with you, Tarquin. I think that kind of took me out of it a little bit with the whole operating system with the robots. I forget what their official name is. It's completely gone. Jaegers. Jägermeister. Yeah.
I like the way the beasties are like continually learning and getting better and coming back stronger and stronger. Kind of like the Borg in Star Trek, like they learn. Each generation learns.
Right. Well, that's because they're being built. They're being looking at it again this last time. It's like they're almost being 3D printed. In the cloning lab, it seems like they're
those crafty little
manually
aliens.
adding muscle tissue and things.
Mm.
So, but I mean, if your brain's going to speak up about that, you can say that creatures that size would sort of collapse in on themselves and not be able to move. That at a certain point, it becomes impossible to drive a creature that big in Earth's gravity.
But where's the fun in that?
But where's the fun in that? When you're talking about fairy tales, you don't quibble about talking bears. It's part of the story.
Fair enough.
My big quibble with it is that Crimson Typhoon is not in it for long enough. They're in one battle for about 5 minutes, and I was like, no, I want to see more of the 3-armed one.
Well, we never get that. Well, I'll tell you something this film doesn't have, and neither of the films that we're going to be discussing tonight have, and that's an X-Files connection. Just to get that in. Yeah, well, there might be, but I searched and searched. I was searching before the call, before the recording, and I could not find anything. The only interesting connection in this film is that there is a wrestler in it. I'm a big fan of wrestling, so I spotted him straight away. Robert Melee, who you can't miss it. He's been in all sorts of films. He was in the Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes. You'd know him if you saw him, kind of thing. But he was a wrestler called Kurgan in the late 90s. Not that that's a new connection thing, but it was just something I spotted in watching this film. So, what do you think of this film, Tarquin? Are you a fan?
Well, I think if I was like a kid, then I'd love it. But as an adult, I think it's beautiful. I really like the robots. I love the monsters. There's some great action sequences, but I question the whole Earth organization, the science department in particular, and so I have reservations about it. I think great kids film, maybe not for adults, is my verdict.
And how would you sum up this film, Nicole? What are your main points for saying that this is the best kaiju film, apart from Godzilla -1?
I would say it's efficient, it's beautiful, it pays homage to everything that came before it while executing it very well on its own. The acting, while not perfect and not always sensical, I think is done very well. Better than, by comparison, certainly I would say much better than the bulk of the kaiju movies before it. I would say, how can you not enjoy a battle where there's surprise wings followed by surprise sword, and you have that stunning shot with the winged kaiju and Gypsy Danger above Earth's atmosphere, and it cuts the thing in half, and you get the slow-mo and the sun and the Earth's rising and the robot and the glowing blood and the it's tremendous. And I was just like,
and that gorilla kaiju as well. That was cool.
Yeah, it was very gorilla movement type of thing with the sort of big belly.
So yeah, he was my man. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. And it's just, you know, the ending is very high stakes. I think they communicate that pretty well. I think it falls down a little bit visually in terms of what's going on inside the pilot compartment at the very end of the film. It gets very chaotic and hard to follow what's happening, what Charlie Hunnam's supposed to be doing. But it's clear enough from the exterior shots what's happening, how they make it work, how they outthink the creators of the kaiju and blow them up. I think it's a little bit, it's Deus Ex Machina for Raleigh to be able to escape in the end and make it back to the surface. But maybe they thought, we've killed enough of these pilots in this. I think, they kill almost everybody except for these two. These are the last two remaining Jaeger pilots at the end of the film. Except for the one that's got the busted arm.
That very end with Mako and
it's very James Bond.
Right, very
Exactly.
James Bond.
Which
Yes,
James Bond
was,
movie it is that has them on the raft, but I know there is one.
It just needed a sexual pun, didn't it?
That little capsule where James switches off the telly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just I'm waiting for them to kiss, and I'm like, oh right, it wouldn't sell as well in China if they let them kiss. Well, they can't do that. They have to have a nice hug, very meaningful hug.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
but
Okay.
You reminded me of Charlie
it wraps
Hunnam's.
up in a nice neat bow. But the end titles are gorgeous, and it kind of sucks you back in. To leave you leave the theater with a good feeling still, I think. And yeah, that's what I think of it. It's just great fun to pop in when you want to watch a good action movie.
Okay. Well, I shall save my thoughts for the end of the episode once we've discussed Tarquin's choice. But before we do that, if nobody's got anything else to add, we shall take a short break and be back in a moment. Okay, so welcome to the intermission. This is the part of the episode in which I ask my co-hosts a random question, a question that they've not prepared for, and get their honest first answer. So, Nicole, Tarquin, are you ready?
Kill me now.
Okay. If you could pitch a giant animal movie, what animal would you choose? So this has to be an animal that has grown beyond its size into city-destroying size, enough to make it an interesting. Because obviously Godzilla is a a mutated iguana or lizard or whatever is supposed to be. King Kong is an oversized gorilla. What oversized animal would you pick for your own kaiju movie? Tarquin.
Okay, I guess a Scotty dog would be quite charming. Just urinating on buildings and melting walls and stuff like that.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
very
Drowning
frisky.
passerby.
Yeah. Barking at the bikes.
My grandfather had one, and it would take your shoelaces off in a minute. So, yeah, it'd be ferreting up and down, munching everything in sight, getting very excitable, and they're adorable. So, yeah, a giant Scotty dog.
Excellent choice. Nicole, what about you?
That's a tough one. What would seem intimidating at that? I did think about going the cutesy direction, like giant lemur. But I think if I was trying to go gross, I would say probably like a giant housefly. I think would be a good combination of disgusting and destructive and like would, dissolve people with its vomit and just
Deafening
really
people
icky.
for like miles away.
Yeah, with a deafening hum.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Something that would like drive you crazy to have to listen to it for an extended period of time.
The
That or
military
something
would just
with
put up a
way
giant
too
pane
many
of glass.
legs, like a house centipede kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of them, really, haven't we? We've had a big moth, big spiders. Although not sort of city-sized spiders. I think there's one that pops up in the Monsterverse, or the Monarchverse, or whatever it's called, very fleetingly.
I can't remember. How big does it get in Eight-Legged Freaks?
Eight-legged freaks. Yeah, there were some whoppers in there. And there was a film in the 70s, Tarantula, which was like a Volkswagen with 8 legs stuck on the side of it and a furry blanket. That was a classic from Saturday morning matinees.
Although I'd have
a
to...
few.
I
King
mean,
Kong as well.
I mean, it's not
The later
wholly
sequels.
original, but I'd have to go for giant cats. It'd have to be. I remember
Like
that...
house cats or like
Yes.
tigers?
Yeah, I remember a Monty Python animated sketch by obviously Terry Gilliam about the giant cats in London. And I watched.
Thinking of the goodies.
No, it's definitely Python. I think it's in A Nerve for Something Completely Different. I'm sure it's in that.
Okay.
It's at the end of the Gangster Grannies sketch, I think. I could be wrong. My memory's a little foggy on that, but just these sort of Terry Gilliam style animations of cats sort of like on their haunches across the London sort of cityscape. I'll have to find it and send you the link. But yeah, I remember. Well, Terry Gilliam's animations always used to freak me out when I was younger, anyway, because they're just so weird and creepy.
Yeah.
But I remember that, so it's not an original choice, but I think that would be quite, just big cats licking themselves for all to see.
That
That
guy's
would be
imagination
horrifying.
just comes from somewhere totally different. Yeah.
There's a really good children's book from Dave Pilkey called Cat Kong. That's very similar, where he actually like photographed his cat. He'd like held it up and then
I've seen that.
photoshopped his hands out of it.
Yeah. Excellent.
Out attacking the city. It's very funny. It's very cute.
Well, there we go. That's the intermission question for you guys. Not too bad this time around. Didn't stump anybody. But there we go. Let's call that the end of the intermission, and we'll head back to the main podcast. Okay, so we're now heading over to Tarquin for his choice. What was it? An easy decision for you, Tarquin?
Yeah, pretty much instantaneous. There's only one film I've loved all my life.
And what did you go for?
King Kong.
We're millionaires, boys. I'll share it with all of you. Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of the world!
Wild, weird, wonderful. The stuff for which movies were made. Adventure, to make you wonder if it's true, while your eyes convince you that it is. Truly, the thrill of thrills. Don't miss it this time.
So 1933, directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. Script by James Ashmore Creelman and Ruth Rose. Effects by Willis O'Brien and Marcel Delgado, amongst others. Starring Fay Wray as Anne Darrow, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, Bruce Cabot as Jack Driscoll, and Noble Johnson as the native chief. Synopsis. Famous filmmaker Carl Denham's boat is in the harbour. He has set sail for the tropics for his next expedition. Stung by industry feedback that his movies lack a romantic angle, he sorely needs a dame to go with him. Gotta have a dame, see? Alas, no respectable agency will lease him an actress because he has an unfortunate reputation as a reckless maniac that gets people killed. So he goes to the Barry and sizes up the queue outside a woman's refuge. Too wretched, too snaggletooth, too warty. Then he happens across a beautiful shoplifter attempting to steal an apple in slow motion. Anne Darrow, half-starved and delirious. She faints in his arms. Perfect. The boat chugs off towards the dark side of the globe. Carl outlines his concept, Beauty and the Beast. He has a map of an island where a potential beast resides. Captain Jack Driscoll isn't happy about having a sappy board on his boat. Gives a man's thoughts, ain't right. They arrive at Skull Island, where colourful natives wish to trade Anne for 6 of their local women as a sacrifice to renowned doll fetishist King Kong, a humongous gorilla that likes playing with titchy women and their accessories. Having procured Anne, where can Kong safely store his new toy? The fauna of Skull Island is ravenous and ferocious. Wherever the ape sets Anne down, a new threat instantly emerges, be it a Tyrannosaurus rex, a giant serpent, or a pterodactyl. Unless you intend to eat it immediately, do not take a sausage sandwich to Skull Island. It's just not safe. I cannot emphasize this enough. Anyway, Carl Denham caught King Kong with one measly gas bomb and will exhibit him on Broadway tonight. From the dark heart of Africa to the vibrant centre of civilization, the 8th wonder of the world, live on stage in New York, New York, this very evening. It's bound to be the showbiz sensation of the season. What could possibly go wrong? This synopsis has been brought to you by Chrome Steel Chains. You can see yourself in them. Done.
Lovely, lovely. Oh, although I would like to point out again, as a wrestling fan, the 8th wonder of the world is Andre the Giant.
Okay, before then.
I would like to point out that it's supposed to be an island off Sumatra that they get him from, and that's in Indonesia.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the location.
So his speech is all wrong.
Not Africa. Fair point.
But Denham's not one to stick to the facts if he doesn't have to.
So, what's your history with this then, Tarquin? When did you first see this film?
I mean, it's like one of my earliest childhood memories watching a film, I think, on TV. And yeah, I was just instantly fascinated by and always loved it.
And would you say you have an affinity for this sort of the kaiju films, the sort of giant monster films?
Well, I did dig up this list, so I guess as much as anyone, it's. But this film in particular, I think it really stands out. There's nothing close to it in my book.
Okay. So what is it? Why did you pick this film?
Well, if you're talking about a giant monster rampaging, then I don't think there's another film that brings home the threat. There's, when it kills someone, it doesn't mess around. Like it bites them, it eats them, they scream. Like there's genuine mortal terror. When it drops someone, it's somebody dying. It's not, a Hollywoodized, sanitized production. There's real stakes involved.
I must admit, I mean, I've watched this, a few times, and I remember watching it quite young, and obviously relishing dinosaurs and giant monkeys or giant apes. But watching it again this time round, it is pretty violent for 1930s. Although there's not a lot of blood and gore and everything, it's quite nasty in places.
Yeah, pre-code, so pre the Hays Code, so, and some kind of almost partial nudity with Fay Wray as well. Like her top is quite diaphanous at several points, and the way Kong holds her and looks at it is very lascivious.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, it's not necessarily sort of, overtly, or I've not necessarily overtly sort of thought of Fay Wray as, a very sort of sexy character and everything. But this time around, it was quite whether I was just a bit old, with older eyes and, looking at it through a different perspective. She is very, she's not quite as one-dimensional as maybe she first sort of comes across in viewing it when I was younger, because she just seems a bit of a there to just sort of scream, but then she's somebody who's sort of trying to make her way one way or another, and
she's very hungry and desperate.
Lucky.
She really wants to fit in.
Yeah.
On the ship.
She has pluck. She has moxie.
Yes. She's got spunk.
That's why Captain Driscoll eventually warms to her, I think. Even though he's disgusted by having a woman around.
Yes, women just can't help being a bother, apparently.
I mean, that's a real thing. They don't like women on ships.
Yeah, I have heard that as a sailor's superstition.
Yeah, never set sail on a Friday and never have a woman on your boat. These are the rules.
You see, previously, obviously, me and Nicole have talked about triangle, so really, that's kind of true. If he'd not even invited her,
you see what happens, yeah.
Yes, but he just can't help but care about her. Say, I guess I love you. Most
You're all
romantic line
right.
ever.
Yeah. Well, it's a true story. I mean, because the makers of the film, yes, Cooper and Schoedsack, the two directors, they used to make, they used to go off to far-flung places and film tigers and things and natives, and that's how they made their money. So he is basically Carl Denham, and there was the same problem that the industry would get back to him and say, look, you'd make twice as much money if you had a woman in it. So, and then Schoedsack got married and to Ruth Jones, and Cooper was all sore and ornery about having a woman on the boat and a woman on the expeditions, but Ruth Jones more than proved her worth and ended up as the scriptwriter on King Kong.
Well,
she was an asset to the team.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the magic of King Kong is the island, Skull Island, and Willis O'Brien's amazing dinosaur effects, and the way he pioneered things like multiplane technology to give you like foreground action and background action, like rear projection of the dinosaurs moving around, and say Fay Ray screaming in the foreground, and the beautiful jungle they created. The effects are just magnificent, I think, for their time.
Yeah, I mean, I was, again, watching this for probably fourth or fifth time. It struck me how, aside from the creature effects and the stop motion and everything else, just the look of the film and the depth that it's got for 1933 is pretty good. And obviously it's very sort of grainy and black and white, which probably helps in some ways. But even the depth of where the natives are kidnapping Anne from the boat, and you get this sort of top down view of that sort of happening, and them sort of pulling up to the boat. It just looks pretty incredible for 1933.
Yeah.
They were.
I would disagree a little bit on the creature effects being that great. There was even I looked just to see like what the contemporary opinion was of it, and there was at least one review that was like, the movement of the creatures is pretty mechanical, but if you can get past that, you'll have a good time. So, it's more, I think people were willing to overlook it because there's no way to get it 100% smooth with stop motion animation. You just can't do it. But
No.
I think I would agree that the other effects, the compositing, the matte paintings are beautiful. Like, there are great shots of the ship leaving and coming into port in the fog, and I found that extremely believable, that it's this, giant expedition ship coming in or leaving, and there are people on the rail, and it seemed very real to me. And they're really good at putting together, here's the close up of Kong, and here's Fay Ray in the foreground, and here's this, other bit in this third layer. And I think they did that really well.
Yeah, there's a great shot of the ship going through the fog. It's very striking. They were. There's a lot of really good production art for it, and their guide was Gustav Doré, the old illustrator, and they were trying to get his style, like for the detail, because they felt that he used black and white the best. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Do you know? Did
about
they build
the jerky
that whole
movement.
wall?
Yeah.
That was really impressive set-wise. The gigantic gate that they keep separate them from Kong.
It took 4 tractors to open the door.
I would believe it.
And they used it for a couple of other things.
I interrupted you. You were saying about the miniature, the movement.
Yeah. What was I going to say? No, it's gone. Oh yeah. So I mean, other people, like when they were making it, they used pruned rabbit hair for Kong, and they were worried because they could see it bristling as they were shooting it. But when they showed it to like the industry heads, even the most skeptical of them were saying, "Oh look, Kong's really mad. His skin's bristling." So it seemed to work for a lot of people. There was a guy underneath a table with a little pegboard. The way they got the figures to move was they'd unleash little pegs underneath and move them on increment by increment.
Yeah. I mean, it was pioneering work. Certainly.
Yeah. They really gave Willis O'Brien
without Willis O'Brien.
Yeah. Well, he was his apprentice in Mighty Joe Young.
I mean, I always find stop motion very endearing. I think I grew up with Clash of the Titans and various Sinbad films where it's all stop motion creatures and things like that. So I always feel very nostalgic when I see anything that's stop motion. And yeah, you can tell it's stop motion, but I always found the effect quite creepy and very unnerving because it is, it looks very unnatural, but almost, it does almost look like something is coming to life, which is, I suppose, the point, really. But
I think the skeletons in Jason and the Argonaut work best for me.
Yeah.
In childhood, that's one I couldn't argue with.
And I think again, you've got to sort of see this as being nearly 100 years ago now.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's just insane to think, that's that film could be made at that time, I suppose. I mean, how did you sort of research how long it took to actually make this film?
Took a year, and but they had an advantage because Willis O'Brien was working on another dinosaur film after The Lost World, which you mentioned before. He was working on this film called Creation with dinosaurs and cave people, and so they cannibalized that and added all that research, not so much the footage, into King Kong, and they really just let Willis O'Brien have everything he wanted. They pioneered this process so that they could get shots of what they were shooting in real time, so that he could see if the footage was working, if the composites were working. And they just went into amazing detail on so many effects, like the plane swooping into the Empire State Building. They really lavished money on it because Cooper was the head of the studio. David L. Selznick just brought him in, plopped him on as head of production, and so he was able to nick bits from other films, like The Swamp was made for another film, The Most Dangerous Game, but really in the back of his mind he was thinking, this will be good in King Kong, and so yeah, there was a lot of that going on.
So how do you think the sort of final act of this film sort of works? Obviously we come away from Skull Island, and all the the creatures that are on there into the wilds of New York City. Do you think that that differential works really well in the film?
Yeah. They actually changed the size of the model. It was 18 inches on in the jungle, and then 24 inches in New York, just because they wanted to beef it up and have it more, Kong be more of a threat. There's some great shots of him causing pandemonium. Extras were damaged during the course of the shooting because they were just going wild, running away and banging into each other. Apparently, the editor came back and said, "Okay, well, we finished editing it. It's 13 reels." And Cooper said, "No movie of mine is going to be 13 reels." And so he insisted on shooting another scene in the subway, where Kong emerges from underneath a subway train and throws it around. Yeah, I love those shots. And New York at that time is a great place for Kong to go wild.
This was actually the first time I've ever seen this movie was this past week.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. I had seen bits of the 1976 version on TV. I had seen bits of the 2005 version, but neither of those all the way through, and had never seen any of the 1933 King Kong except as, clips in history of horror movies or history of monster movies kind of things. So there were some interesting surprises. I was surprised the New York sequence is only about 20 minutes of the movie. I didn't realize that it was so much of it was Skull Island, as compared to him rampaging in New York. I was not surprised at the racism, but I was
thanks for bringing
surprised that you can't not bring it up. I mean, the whole, this whole film could be taken as an allegory for the dangers of the more animalistic races coming after white women. And the makers of it their previous work would not subtract from that assumption, I don't think. But I was surprised that they used actual black people as the natives, as opposed to white people in blackface. That was a positive surprise. One of them got...
that for 1933. That's virtually woke.
Yeah, for the time. The fact that they actually credited Noble Johnson as the native chief, so he got an on-screen credit.
A lovely bloke by all accounts.
It was interesting. The man who plays the cook, and he's only ever referred to, he's referred to as, I think, Charlie on board.
Yeah, Charlie.
And I think if he's mentioned in the credits, I don't think he is mentioned in the credits. I think, listed around, he's referred to as the Chinese cook for the most part. He's played by a man named Victor Wong, not the one from Big Trouble in Little China. And I thought it was interesting that he was delivering his broken English lines in an American accent rather than going for a Chinese accent. So I kind of thought of that as maybe his way of, giving a middle finger to the producers / directors of the film, for giving him this kind of dialogue and costume to wear. But, it's you can't overlook it. I mean, you can, say, yes, it's the time. Yeah, but that doesn't, for me, that doesn't really make it any better. The only thing that makes it slightly better is that they did use actual black actors to play black roles in this movie, even if they are stereotypical natives of the island. But outside of that,
did you enjoy
now
it?
that that's out of the way, I will say that it was better acted than I was expecting. Robert Armstrong, particularly as, director Carl Denham, I thought was very good. I thought Fay Wray was way better than she needed to be for this role. This role really just calls for her to stand around and scream and, moon over the second officer. But I think she actually brought a lot of humanity and humor to her part. And
there's always like four different emotions playing behind her face.
Well, she could be plucky and brave where it called for it. She's determined not to let the director down. Even though she's scared, she's still going to do it. Bruce Cabot is very good as a plank of wood, mooning over Fay Wray, despite himself. Captain Englehorn, Frank Riker as Captain Englehorn, I thought was quite believable as a ship captain who's very concerned for his crew and all that. So it was better acted than I was expected. I was pleasantly surprised to see that a woman helped write this film. It had its good points. It's a good adventure story, for its time. It was a good, fun adventure story. I liked all the Skull Island, fighting the dinosaurs stuff. I was just like, whoa, why is there a Stegosaurus here? I thought this was a King Kong movie. And there's Stegosaurus, and there's a Tyrannosaurus, and there's a Pteranodon, and giant snakes.
Yeah, you see what I mean about Fay Wray. King Kong can't put Fay Wray down.
I was expecting from the new movie that, there would be giant insects in there somewhere.
There's a whole lost sequence.
Oh, is it?
There was meant to be a spider pit. Where the log is crossing the chasm, the giant log that he shakes them all off and they fall down. There were meant to be lots of spiders down there, and that's why in the Peter Jackson film there's a whole 20-minute insect sequence.
See, that would have been good and horrifying and gruesome and stuff.
See, I found that scene with the log really quite horrifying, to be fair, because it just keeps going, and it just doesn't sort of stop. He's quite persistent and
he's going to get everyone.
It's pretty brutal. I mean, I think a testament to this film is when you look at this film tells the story, and it tells the story really well in just under 100 minutes. And then you look at the Peter Jackson version, which struggles to tell it in 188 minutes.
Yeah, he Diley needs an editor. He just takes every scene and wrings it out for everything it's worth. Whereas in the original, like they catch Kong, they drop the gas bomb, and then they say, "All right, come on, boys, we're going to Broadway." And then next scene, you're in Broadway, and don't mess around.
Yeah, and I mean, not to take too much away from Peter Jackson's version, it looks absolutely stunning.
True.
But a lot more, it's just so bloated compared to, it could tell the story in a lot less time. Not even.
Need it.
No, it's just all about getting the spectacle in for Peter Jackson in that film, and it doesn't need it. It needs at least, 60 minutes off it.
Yeah, that dinosaur stampede for a start.
Yes, yeah. But we're getting very sidetracked there. But anything else you want to add before we wrap that up, Tarquin?
Okay, so I just want to give a list of other Western Kaiju things that occurred to me yesterday. So we've got the giant robot rampaging in Mars Attack. We've got War of the Worlds, both versions. We've got Gorgo, which is like an English version of Godzilla. Giant robot scene in Terminator Salvation. Digby, the biggest dog in the world. Jurassic Park, all the various incarnations. Walking with Dinosaurs. Ray Harryhausen, in particular, It Came From Beneath the Sea, the giant octopus, Jason and the Argonauts, Talos. Mm-hmm. Neptune in Clash of the Titans. Beavis and Butthead, there was a great Kaiju scene in the movie. Beastie Boys Intergalactic, they did a giant robot thing. Monstro the Whale in Pinocchio. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Mechwake in ABC Warriors and Robusters in 2000 AD. The Genie in Thief of Baghdad, Primal, fantastic animated series by Gerdie Tchaikovsky, The Jolly Green Giant, Walking with Dinosaurs, what else? Eight-Legged Freaks, we've mentioned. There's a great song, Yoshimi versus the Giant Robots by the Flaming Lips. Suicide Squad, that kind of starfish with the eyeball in the centre of it. Starzo.
If we're talking music videos as well, Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys.
Yeah. What else? Oh, the Chewits advert. That was massive.
Yes, Chewits advert. Yeah, absolutely.
Can't forget that. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man and Ghostbusters. Cloverfield, Mist, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, and Kitten Kong in the goodies. There you go.
And Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Cloverfield is on my short list. But...
Well,
yeah, that was a great one. I really enjoyed that.
I mean, do you know what? I think that probably, had I been picking a film, that probably would have been my choice, because I do have a massive soft spot for Cloverfield. I'm a big fan of found footage, and I just really enjoyed Cloverfield, and I still enjoy watching it to this day. I think it works really well, and I think it is a massive shame that they've just not nailed those. I mean, 10 Cloverfield Lane was a very good film, but it's not anything to do with the original Cloverfield. But
well, they went grievously wrong with the third one, didn't they? With the Cloverfield paradox.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't not enjoy Cloverfield Paradox, but I think everybody was just kind of itching for something that connected a bit more to maybe the first film. And although we did get a bit of it in it, it's not really what you would have wanted, which is a shame. But that definitely would have been my pick, I think, for this episode.
Where is J.J. Abrams? What's happened to him? He's just gone into hiding.
Yeah, I think he's probably got 1 million Star Wars fans.
After Rise of Skywalker, he should be.
Shame. I like him. I think he brought a lot of fresh ideas to.
I like him as a person.
Cinema.
Yeah. But yes, so it's time for me to sort of give my 2 pence really about your choices. To be completely honest, Pacific Rim. I've talked on the podcast before about Mad Max Fury Road taking me at least 3 attempts to watch and not get through, and then finally sort of get through. And Pacific Rim, it was exactly the same. This was the 3rd attempt to watch Pacific Rim because I just couldn't get into it. And I did enjoy it more than maybe my initial sort of 20-minute stints into it in the past have been. But visually, Pacific Rim is it's astounding. I think it's like Nicole said, it sort of dips into that costume style of the monsters, and they're not made to look too overdone in terms of the CGI, and the action pieces in it are just amazing. The amount of detail that each of those, not even necessarily just the fight scenes, but any of the the CGI and the special effects look absolutely incredible, and so deep. Narratively, I struggled with it, and I think I found the concept quite convoluted in terms of the 2 people in the controlling the robot and all that sort of thing, and it didn't really get me on board for the whole of the film. But I think that last act is pretty incredible. It's pretty spectacular. But I don't think it is a film that I would go back to. King Kong, I think quite rightly, it has a lot of problems, and it's easy to just sort of throw at the time that it was made at it, but at the same time, it paved such a road for cinema really. And it's such a blockbuster before blockbuster was even a term, and I still think it's a very simple story. It's technically quite amazing for its time. A lot of the characters don't have the depth that maybe they deserve, but ultimately, I think I would go in favour of King Kong. For me, it's a more enjoyable film.
Okay, well, I'll take that. So I've won the duel. Hooray! All
I
right,
wonder if that's
finality.
got to do with your sleepiness has to do with not seeing them in the cinema.
Possibly.
Like I saw Fury Road 4 times in the cinema.
It could be. It could
I do
be.
love Fury
but
Road.
I mean, I did end up sort of really enjoying Fury Road once I got through the whole of it. That's not to say I didn't enjoy Pacific Rim, but I think potentially, I do think Guillermo del Toro, in my opinion, is a little bit overrated.
Them's fighting words.
You can swear.
He's great when
You're
he's
allowed
great.
to swear.
I think Hellboy, the second Hellboy, is a better Kaiju film. I think that was fantastic. The giant green beastie in that. He's done some great films.
I think Hellboy is definitely way better in terms of character element.
I mean, Selma Blair, come on. She's smoking in that film, she's brilliant. And I don't just mean good looking, I mean she's soulful, there's so much going on behind her eyes. And Ron Perlman is always fantastic, so, much better film.
But that's purely my opinion. Obviously, when we release this episode, it will go to the polls, and we shall see what the good listeners of the Movie Duel podcast have to say.
Curses, I've lost.
And I'll definitely add a plea. If you're one of our listeners, please go vote. We sometimes get
vote for King Kong. King Kong.
Ridiculously small number of votes total.
Yes, it's very. You can vote. You can vote over on X. Just obviously like and follow our page on there, and the polls are added to the release notes for the episode. So just scroll down a little bit further and you'll find the poll. If you listen to us on Spotify, you can also vote over there, or you can just drop us a message, an email, wherever. Obviously at the start of this episode you will have heard me give all the contact details for the Movie Duel podcast. You can contact us via any of those means, and cast your vote. It doesn't just have to be on the polls. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think is the best kaiju film, because you might not agree with either of them. Or you might have picked, you might have reasons for something very similar, and whatever it may be, just let us know.
But in your heart, it's King Kong. Okay.
Or Pacific Rim. I can't have Godzilla -1. Pacific Rim.
It's suddenly, the Movie Duel podcast is suddenly getting very competitive.
It's a
duel.
duel.
I mean, it is a bit intrinsic in the concept of movie duel.
Yes, but in a bit of friendly competition. But there we go.
2 enter, 1 must leave.
That's just. I haven't thought about how we're going to end this episode now. Ooh. Maybe have you both prepared a quote for the end?
Yep.
Okay, so I think maybe what we'll do for these episodes moving forward is that whoever I agree with does the quote at the end. All right. So just leaves me to say goodbye. For Nicole to say goodbye.
Bye.
And for Tarquin to say.
They'll have to think of a whole lot of new adjectives when I get back.